Hi there. Today I'm going to be talking about pets in properties and more specifically service animals, so support animals. Now the situation here is most tenancy agreements, if not all, have got a no pet clause, and 90% of landlords, I would say, are thinking twice before allowing pets in the property, mainly due to the possibility of damage and obviously noise and nuisance to neighbours. Now, what we've got to look at here is absolutely, landlords, it's your property. If you want to refuse to have a pet in there, then that is your right to do so. However, if your tenant is disabled or becomes disabled whilst being your tenant, you have to look at things differently. Now, under the Equality Act, there's a thing called reasonable adjustments. And this basically means if your tenant or prospective tenant is disabled or becomes disabled and puts a written request into you to have a service animal, you can't just blanket refuse. Now, normally what the tenancy agreements say is you have to have a reasonable excuse to refuse. However, when it comes to service animals, it's a little bit more than just a reasonable excuse. What we're looking at here is general factual reasons. So maybe there's a health and safety issue of having an animal in the property or something along those lines. So it isn't just a no, I'm sorry. Now, the Equality Act actually sets out the definition of disability, and you only need to make a reasonable adjustment if your tenant has a disability as defined under Section 6 of the Equality Act. So it's important to know that, because some of the disabilities or ailments that tenants might claim they require a support animal for, if it's not listed, then you don't have to, as a landlord, actually make any reasonable adjustments. So what we're going to look at is what is a reasonable adjustment. Now, that can be anything from a change to policy and procedure to terms in an agreement, obviously a term in a tenancy agreement. And like I say, most tenancy agreements do state no pets, but if your tenant asks you, then you must make this reasonable adjustment. If you don't make this reasonable adjustment and haven't been able to give a factual reason as to why, you will be breaking the law. Now, this is direct discrimination under the Equality Act, Section 20, 21 and 25. And it also is a criminal offence. So it's possible that you could be fined. That's the minimum that could happen. But you could also face prosecution. Now, it's worth bearing in mind, these service dogs are obviously trained much better than an ordinary domestic dog or cat or whatever animal they are. So they'll be trained to ask to go to the toilet, they'll be trained not to scratch the furniture. So it is worth bearing that in mind. Now, also, we've got going through Parliament at the moment an act with regards to having dogs in residential premises. This will have a huge impact on landlords because it is looking at allowing tenants a blanket mandatory right to have an animal in a property. Now, having read the bill, it isn't just giving carte blanche to tenants to have a pet in a property. It does set out guidance and it does set out stipulations on what a tenant must be doing in regards to be a good tenant. The dog or cat must be well behaved and obviously registered in the appropriate places. So registered with a vet, make sure it's microchipped, not under the Dangerous Dogs Act, etc., etc. Now, as this act is going through Parliament, we're pretty sure that it is going to get to the point where it is enacted, get royal assent, and it will become law. This could be this year, it could be next year. Parliament obviously at the moment have got better things to do with their time. But what I have done, just to preempt this a little bit and help landlords be proactive rather than reactive, is I've put together a pet policy. Now, this pet policy is in addition to any tenancy agreement and just sets out for the tenant some do's and don'ts with regards to having a pet in the property and obviously clauses with regards to any damage, etc. I've got this available on my website if you'd like a copy. So do have a look over there. It's gothardrow.com. I will put the link in the comments. So if you've got any questions about animals in properties and obviously in specific support dogs, do drop me a message and I will answer those as soon as I can for you. But obviously it's just to be mindful if you're looking at taking on a tenant who is disabled and they do have a support animal, you cannot just blanketly refuse. You could be breaking the law and leaving yourself open to prosecution. Thanks very much for listening, guys.